Auto Portability Simulation by Spencer Williams. This video presentation is designed to give the viewer a basic understanding of the Auto Portability Simulation, which models the operation and benefits of auto portability.
Well, hello, my name is Spencer Williams. I'm the President and Chief Executive Officer of Retirement Clearinghouse. And in this video that we're recording, we'd like to demonstrate for you a unique project that we undertook that creates a visual understanding of auto portability. Now, for those of you who don't know what auto portability is, it's a technology-based system that essentially moves an individual's 401k account from their former employer plan to their new employer plan. The innovation inside of auto portability is one that's quite common. It's electronic records matching. So an example of that is, say, a credit card, and every time you swipe a credit card at a retail vendor, a form of electronic records matching is happening. We've taken that technology and applied it to the 401k industry so that the mobile workforce, people who change jobs, when they change jobs, their retirement account follows them to their new employer plan using an electronic records matching technology. Now, in order to quantify and understand auto portability, we undertook a unique project. That project we called the Auto Portability Simulation, and it uses technology itself to help quantify and then illustrate the benefits of auto portability. And so we're going to show that to you today on the video. I'm going to take a few minutes and set up a little narrative for what you're going to see, and then partway into that I'm going to hit the start button and I'm going to show you an illustration of auto portability and what its benefits to the industry might be, and more importantly, its benefits to plan sponsors, and finally, most important of all, to the actual participants who will benefit the most from auto portability. So on your screen, you'll see a diagram, and I'm going to explain the diagram, and then I'm going to hit the start button and provide you with a narrative of kind of what's going on. So on your screen, you see a diagram. There's actually two diagrams there. Top and bottom are almost exact mirror images of each other. You may notice in the bottom diagram a little gray house figure. That house, its meaning and importance will come into play in a second. But what we've essentially done is we've quantitatively compared what's happening in the mobile workforce today with what will happen when auto portability is implemented industry-wide. So the top diagram is auto portability today, and the bottom diagram is the future. Quick description of the top diagram. It should be reasonably familiar to you, but it really mirrors in a method that's called discrete events simulation what goes on when an individual changes jobs. So up in the upper left-hand corner, you'll see a box labeled Employer Plan 1, and there's a bunch of little colored, I call them Lego figures inside. And when we start this, the little Lego figures will go in motion. To continue on our diagram, over on the far right-hand side, you'll see a box labeled Employer Plan 2. Okay? Now, Employer Plan 1 and 2 represent all the employer plans out there in the 401k world. There's 600 and something thousand of them. But mathematically, we're going to track what's going on when people change jobs. Now, a common understanding, which turns out to be incorrect, but a common understanding of what goes on when people change jobs is that their 401k moves from Employer Plan 1 to Employer Plan 2. What we're going to illustrate for you is what is actually happening. And that's the meaning of the three boxes below the upper travel lanes. I call the two little gray lines that connect Employer Plan 1 and 2 the travel lanes. Those boxes represent, the labels show what they are. They represent the percentage of the population that is cashing out. That's the box with little red Lego figures in it right now. And as you can see, that has a lot of little red Lego figures in there. The middle box is IRA. Now that's an IRA that an individual has already established, or someone makes the effort to move their 401k account into an IRA. And the third box there with the yellow figures in it is a special box called Safe Harbor IRAs. What we've done is we've simulated a segment of the mobile workforce. And as you can see from the label at the top, that segment is everybody who changes jobs that has less than $5,000 in their account. And one of the more astounding statistics that I've seen in my life is that today there are more than 5 million people per year with a 401k account who change jobs and have less than $5,000. So what we're going to see in just a second is what's happening today. And of course, as I've already indicated, we'll then move down to the lower set of boxes and talk about what's possible if we implement auto portability. So I'm going to go ahead and start the animation and describe what's going on. So as you can see, little Lego figures are coming out of employer plan number 1. And the majority of them are immediately turning red and dropping down into the cash out box. That's actually statistically what happens today. 55% of the participant population of these small accounts immediately cash out their retirement savings. Now, of course, we know the implications of that, meaning that money's gone. You paid taxes on it, you paid a penalty on it, you're left with a residual, but that money won't be there when it's time for you to retire. And maybe even worse, that money, you're foregoing compound earnings on it. So if you're 25 years old, that could be 40 years worth of earnings, meaning whatever that dollar was in there, if it was $1, it's going to be $5 or $6 or $7 when you're 65, and you just gave it up. The second box is the IRA box. As you can see, there's a few Lego figures, the little brown figures that make their way into the IRA box, and that represents people who make the effort on their own to move their money to an IRA. It's a pretty small part of the population. Finally, over in the third box, the yellow box labeled Safe Harbor IRA, there's a special event that goes on, which is if you're one of these small accounts and your employer distributes you from your plan, i.e., they want you out of the plan, if you don't take any action, your account will actually end up in what's called a Safe Harbor IRA. Now, that money didn't pay taxes or penalties, so in one sense it's good. But one of the amazing things, actually disheartening things that we learned in constructing the simulation is a second leakage effect. We call this slow leakage. So if you notice, there's a bunch of little red Lego figures coming out of the bottom of the Safe Harbor IRA box. We call that slow leakage. And when you add fast leakage, which is immediate cash outs, to slow leakage, meaning I waited a little while and then took a distribution from my Safe Harbor IRA, we find that almost 90%, 9 out of 10 small accounts are being cashed out. Last but not least, look all the way over to the little green box, employer plan number 2, and you can see every once in a while we get someone over into their new employer plan. So what we think is the norm, what we think would be the best outcome for most participants is the least likely event to happen and the least often instance that's occurring in the world today. Now that's my cue for shifting our attention down to the bottom set of boxes. As I mentioned before, that little gray box has now turned green. I want to call your attention to the clock that's ticking, if you will, up in the upper right-hand corner. As you can see, it says something like 2040, 2041. We ran this simulation for 30 years, just to mirror what the expected lifetime of a retirement account would be. So if you're 35 years and you retire at a normal retirement age of 65, that's 30 years. So we ran this for 30 years. Well, that clock has now reached about 2040, 2045. The simulation is almost ended at this point in time. But if you look carefully, what you'll see is a very rapid instance of little green figures making their way through what is now a green house figure and over to employer plan number 2. Let me describe exactly what's going on there that is enabling the retention and savings of these accounts. we're using electronic records matching. We're taking a record from your old employer plan, or if you happen to end up in a safe harbor IRA, and we're matching it against all the new employer plans in the universe. Remember, that's what Employer Plan 2 is all about. We match those records against all the new employer plans, and when we find your new employer account, we move your old account, whether it's in a safe harbor IRA or back in your old employer plan, we move it into your new employer plan. What happens when we do that is that those savings are retained. They're not cashed out. They do not suffer from penalties, and they start to get the benefit of compounded earnings over the remaining life of your account before the day that you choose to retire. As we can see in the scoreboard, our animation has ended. Okay, so the clock stopped ticking. We're going to take a look at the scoreboards. Those are the little gray boxes to the right of each of our drawings. Okay, and we're just going to do a quick comparison. So if you look at the upper box, you can see that instead of $225 billion being cashed out, right? If we look at what happens with auto portability, electronic records matching, and automated movement of your account, you can see that we reduce that number to less than $90 billion, meaning we save in excess of $130 billion of people's retirement over this 30-year period. Now, as it turns out, this is just the small accounts. So I'm going to take a second and show you what would happen if we used auto portability for larger accounts. In this instance, we're simply going to take that $5,000 limit and we're going to change it to $15,000. So we're going to look at all of the accounts in the 401k system today as someone changes jobs for people who have less than $15,000. By the way, that average account size is about $4,600. So they're still pretty small accounts. As you can see from our scoreboard, if we leave the current status quo alone and continue to witness or observe the behavior of participants cashing out at these astronomical rates, we'll lose something close to $600 billion in retirement savings. Savings that could have been retained if there was an automated, seamless, frictionless method for your old employer account to make its way to your new employer account. So let's look at the bottom diagram, and as you can see, we can get almost $600 billion. Now, these dollars are actually unappreciated or nominal dollars. What that means is we haven't compounded them for future earnings. So the last exhibit I'm going to show you, we're going to go to now, which is what happens if we then compound or add 5% growth in those accounts every year for the 30 years that they stayed in the system. As you can see from the gold chart in the center of the account, it's a pretty big number. It's close to 1.4 trillion, yes, that's trillion with a T, dollars, that will be there for Americans to enjoy in their golden years. And if you have any further questions about auto portability, we'd be happy to answer them by blog or by call or any other method you would choose to communicate with us. Thanks.
For more information, visit www.rch1.com/auto portability or call 866-827-9608.